What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Path of Exile 2 video. Hope you're all doing very, very well. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to talk about my crazy Pathfinder build. And this is something, if you want to try it, I'm going to give you a full guide right now on how to do this build. Because I think a lot of people probably haven't run with Pathfinder, to be honest. And certainly haven't run with this explosive concoction build, which I'm going to talk to you all about here in this video. So if you're interested in kind of a wacky build where you're using your mana flask to throw bombs at people, then this is the video for you. Okay, so let me just start with the build itself, what the actual skill does, and we're going to get into all the rest of the details right away. So you basically don't get to even use your skill until you get your first Ascendancy done. So you have to put your points into here, mana flask charges, and then the concoction itself. And I'm going to show you that there are choices for you here. So here's what you get to choose, okay? When you get your first Ascendancy, you're going to go mana flask charges, and then you're going to choose a concoction, okay? You can go poison, fulminating, shattering, explosive, and bleeding. For the purposes of this video, we're ignoring the bleed and the poison one. We're not going to do a non-elemental concoction. We're going to do an elemental one. So your choice is one of these three right here. I will say it is a lot better on the passive tree to do either a shattering concoction or a fulminating one, ice or lightning. There's not a lot of support for fire stuff on this side of the tree. If we just type in fire, there's basically nothing. That's not an actual fire node there. So, but there is support for lightning damage, and there's support for cold damage. So there's lightning node, cold up here, lightning right here that I'm already taking, right? There's a lot of support for those. So I would either choose cold or lightning, okay? The other thing too, you can actually get the benefit of ignite, which is explosive concussions is going to give you ignite, but you can get ignite by having flame wall in your setup and putting flame wall down and throwing your concoction through the flame wall, and you're going to get an additional ignite, which is important when we talk about how to scale the damage of this skill. So either choose shattering or fulminating. If you choose shattering concoction, then of course you're going to want to have Herald of Ice as one of your spirit reservations. If you choose fulminating concoction, you're going to want to have Herald of Thunder. The reason is because these skills are very powerful. They add, they have like guaranteed chances to freeze or shock, and they give you exposure as well. So when you first get these abilities, they basically already have, I would say, 2 support gems socketed into them without even needing to put a support on them. Like getting 100% more freeze buildup is huge, and cold exposure on hit, which is huge. If you do the fulminating one, you get 100% more chance to shock, which means you're guaranteed to shock, okay? And it inflicts lightning exposure on hit. So you're getting like what I would say is 2 support gems worth of bonuses on the concoction right when you get it, okay? And then once you actually start putting support gems into it, then it basically becomes like a 4 or 5 link like right away. When you first get it, oh shoot, it dumped it, didn't it? I'll have to put that back on again. When you first get it, of course, hold on, there we go. When you first get it, it's going to go here, and I think I just deleted the supports that I had on it because that's how that works. You're going to want to, you're basically only going to get a 2 link, okay, when you first get it, which does suck, don't get me wrong, but you'll be able to get more later, and I'll talk about that in a second here. You only get 2 support gems right off the bat instead of 3. You basically unlock the 3rd support gem, I think in Act 3, from what I've been able to understand. Martial. There we go. Martial tempo on attack speed. That there. And then we also want the lightning exposure, or not lightning, but let me just give me right here. Lightning. We want infusion. There we go. Perfect. Okay, put that there. So this is what my setup is kind of it. So when you get to Act 3, you're gonna unlock this skill in Act 2. Okay, you do your first Ascendancy in Act 2 in the trial. The second was great. Then you get to Act 3. You're only gonna have 2 supports available on this gem. I would say until you get most of the way through Act 3. I don't know the exact level, and I'm sorry, but I think it was around between level 35 and 40 is when I suddenly unlocked a 3rd support available. You cannot add support gems to fulminating concoction, any of the concoctions. They just naturally gain support slots over time. The first one that I've gained, again, it starts with 2. I got my third one in Act 3, most of the way through Act 3. So you're gonna have to do like half of Act 2 and most of Act 3 before you get an additional support here. And again, you cannot use a jeweler's orb. It does not work on these abilities. Okay, if I take a jeweler orb and I press it on here, it doesn't, I mean, it can't right now anyway, but even when I had 2 gems, I immediately tried to jeweler's orb it and it didn't work. I'm not sure if this is a bug from GGG or if this is intended, but either way, that's how it works, okay? The support gems that I'm running in the fulminating concoction right now are, of course, scatter shot, martial tempo, so I get extra projectiles, more attack speed, and then more damage as lightning, okay? And we're sitting at 3585 right now. But again, remember, we basically get 2 additional supports, in my opinion, because you get 100% more chance to shock and lightning exposure. And that's a really, really big deal. Now, when we're talking about scaling the damage of this skill, really, really important to understand what this does. This does unarmed attack damage. So it consumes charges from your mana flask to throw a bottle that explodes, dealing unarmed lightning attack damage in an area and inflicting lightning exposure. So it does attack damage, it does lightning damage, but it's unarmed lightning damage. So what does that mean? In PoE 1, this always meant that you could not have a weapon on your main hand. You could have something in the offhand, but not in your main hand. In PoE 2, it's not like that. You can have whatever weapon you want in your main hand, and the stats of this weapon will affect the unarmed attack damage that you do with your concoction. So if I take my bow off, my damage is going to drop dramatically. There, 1619, right? 1619 all the way up to 3585. So my bow and my quiver are contributing damage. That's how you're going to scale the damage. That's the first way you want to scale it, okay? Is by having a bow and a quiver. Also, when you first get this ability at level, you know, in Act 2, when you go up here, it's like level 22, level 25 is when you're probably going to be getting it. You're going to need to keep your other bow skills that you were using up until this point. You're going to want to keep using those. So up until I got my Ascendancy unlocked, I was just using like lightning arrow, all the regular kind of like bow ones, lightning arrow, lightning rod. I was doing sort of a regular ranger build. You want to keep those skills when you first get, when you first unlock the concoction, because the concoction, you do not refresh your mana flask charges quick enough to permanently sustain this ability, okay? You actually have to have other abilities on your bar. Now, I don't have that anymore because I've sort of gotten to a point where I can finally sustain it. I'll talk about that later, but you do want to have other bow skills ready to go, including your auto shot. You should actually probably put support gems into your auto shot, I would say, for the first 10 levels or so after you get your concoction, okay? Because you're going to be running out of mana. Mana flask charges, to be precise. You don't actually use mana at all. You use mana flask charges. Okay? Okay. So, I clicked to activate. Why isn't that working? There we go. Okay. So, that's the gem. Now, how do we scale our damage? Number 1, have a bow and a quiver that have +1 to all projectile skills or more. My bow has +2 to projectile skills. That applies to your concoction. So, I have +3 to my projectile skill from my sources, right? So that's really huge. The biggest scaler you can get at all is going to be the increased elemental damage with attacks on your bow. Get a big bow that rolls this, okay? Now, this bow that I have right now is pretty solid. It's missing some stuff, but it's pretty solid. Again, physical damage on your weapon does not matter at all. Don't get anything that scales physical damage modifiers. We don't do any physical damage, nor do we do physical damage conversion. No physical damage at all. It just does flat elemental damage. Important to understand that. So when you get increased elemental damage with attacks on your bow, that is a massive multiplier for your damage, okay? And then get plus to proj. This is the bow that I was running with before. Okay, this is a bow that I got at level 24. I just want to show you that you can get this gear pretty early on, actually. This is a bow that I had at level 24. That's literally right when I was ascending, I had this bow. So +2 to all proj, 57% increased elemental damage with attacks. If you go to the Path of Exile 2 trade website, you can get a bow like this. So look at the filters. The filters I have on here is that it's max level that it was required is level 25. And then I have increased LE damage with attacks, plus to all proj skills, and then lightning damage, okay? And I have 40% baseline on the LE damage with attacks. If we just do another search here, there, 1 exalted orb for this bow right here, 50% LE damage with attacks, 1 to all. So if you have a little bit of currency lying around, you can get a really good bow to get your build started with 1 exalt, okay? And then the quiver that I'm running as well is going to be about another exalt, I would say. Attack speed, level of proj skills, and then flat elemental damage. It also has flat fizz damage on it, which is completely irrelevant, but the flat elemental damage on this quiver is insanely strong. That's what you're looking for to scale your damage, okay? On top of that, you can also grab stuff on the passive tree, of course, which is going to be good. Just really quickly, qualing your weapon doesn't matter at all because the quality will increase the physical base damage of the weapon, so it's completely irrelevant to qual your weapon unless you have a bow that has a baseline elemental damage, that like the base damage that it does is elemental damage. Then you could scale that, I guess, but yeah. The other major thing I'll get to in a second is actually your mana flask itself, but let's talk about the passive tree. So when you're talking about nodes to get here, we're looking at attack damage, lightning damage, or cold damage, depending on which bomb you're using, right? Okay, you got to use your head there. And then you're going to want, of course, projectile damage works as well. Elemental damage works, so things like this. Elemental damage with attacks, that's a big one. This node is huge. I'll get back to this in a second. These are all the flat elemental damage nodes that are percentage, sorry, elemental damage. This is attack damage here. 24% attack damage is actually huge because this does unarmed attack damage. Even though it's a range skill, we usually think of attack damage as like a melee thing, but this buffs your damage to your concoction as well, okay? And then attack speed is really good. Here's 2 like fundamental nodes that you must take. They're right here. It's this one, Vile Wounds, and it's this one, Harness the Elements. So Vile Wounds says 33% increased damage with hits against enemies affected by ailments. That is a massive multiplier for you. You're always going to be inflicting shock, or if you're doing the ice concoction, then you're always going to be inflicting chill and freeze. So you're always going to have ailments on enemies. You're always going to be benefiting from this. And then Harness the Elements works really, really well with both types of concoctions. The ice concoction, or the cold one, is going to be a little bit better for this because you get chill and freeze, whereas the lightning one only gets shock. You can try and get electrocute, but you have to do that a different way, and that'll be later in the game, but for now you only get shock. Now, you can add an additional element to enemies, especially bosses, by taking Flame Wall. And I put the fortress thing on Flame Wall, so it does a big circle. So whenever I'm fighting a boss, I just put a big circle of fire on the ground right on top of their heads, and then I start lobbing projectiles at them. The projectiles, of course, go through the Flame Wall and get additional fire damage. That's not really what we actually care about at all. We don't care about that at all. All we care about is applying Ignite to an enemy because it's an elemental ailment, which means we're going to have Ignite and Shock on them, which gives us, again, more of a damage multiplier. If you're running the cold concoction, you would have chill, freeze, and ignite on bosses in particular. You're only going to really use it for bosses, which would give you 15, 30, 45% more damage. So very, very important damage scaling modifiers there. The rest of the nodes that you're going to invest in are going to be like defensive nodes and then mana flask nodes. And I want to talk about this. This is really important to understand. You need to grab certain mana flask nodes in order to sustain your mana flask, because this ability is going to draw 3 charges from your mana flask every time you throw it, okay? So this means that if you're looking at mana flasks and you're like, what modifiers do I want on my mana flask? All you care about is maximum number of charges. That's it. Number of charges. So don't even worry about like whatever the mana flask consumes. Don't worry about it. You're always consuming 3 charges from your mana flask right here. Consumes 3 charges from your mana flask every time you throw it. So you want maximum charges of your mana flask so that you're going to get basically more ammo to be able to fire. That's how that works. Okay. So Baseline, most mana flasks have 75 charges. You can see right here, 75 is max. And then you can get modifiers that go up to like 105. And as you level up, this only really happens later in the game, but as you level up, you get access to higher tier mana flasks like these transcendent ones, and they go all the way up to 118, sometimes like 120 charges. So you can take it from 75 baseline charges all the way up to like 120. And I'm going to actually swap this one in right now. It doesn't matter what else is on your mana flask at all. It's completely irrelevant. You just want max charge, increased charges. This actually rolled low. This is 58% at a 62, so it could go even higher. Now, you're not going to have access to the one that I'm wearing right now as soon as you get this Ascendancy. You have to like get a higher level. So you're going to have to settle for like something like this. But what you want to do is go find a mana flask and get at least above 100 charges on the mana flask so that you have more ammo to throw, which means you'll be able to sustain the flask for longer. That's what you want to be doing, okay? That is really important. On the passive tree, you're going to get nodes like this. Mana flasks gain charges per second. That's a big one. Or increased mana recovery. No, not increased. Mana recovery from flask doesn't matter. You want nodes like this. 20% increased mana flask charges gained. When you get your second Ascendancy node, you're going to go here and get connected chemistry, which says 50% more flask charges gain. And then another 12% here. So this is 62% flask charges gained. So that means whenever you kill an enemy, they give you a certain number of flask charges back. This is multiplying that exponentially. So once you get connected chemistry, your second Ascendancy node, going through maps, like going through the regular campaign zones, and eventually once you get to maps, it's a breeze because you're killing lots of monsters and it's refilling your mana flask as you're draining it. So it's completely fine. You don't have to worry about anything else once you get this node, basically, and once you get a couple of flask recovery or charges gain, sorry. Again, charges gain, mana recovery, that doesn't matter. This is interesting. This is a little bit of sustain, but again, this is mana flask gain charges per second. That's a big one. Okay, so once you get some of this stuff onto your tubal, especially once you get connected chemistry, you're off to the races and you're able to sustain your flask so that you can just forever. Boss fights become an issue, and early on when you're fighting bosses, it becomes a serious struggle because you are gonna run out of those mana flask charges, okay? Let me show you a really early boss fight that I did. This was like a long time ago. I was level something here. I was using the fire flasks though, which was kind of fun. But you can see this is the fire one. It does leave ignited ground, sorry, which is cool. It does a lot of damage. But I do think that the support for the lightning and the cold concoction are much better, okay? So my flask charges are fine even when I'm running through this like area. Like I'm killing stuff really quickly. I'm doing a lot of damage, okay? And so my sustain on my flasks is good. But once I get to the boss fight at the end here, you're gonna see I'm gonna start to run out of flask charges. I think a little bit. I might even be able to, but look at the bottom left of the screen. Watch my mana flask. It'll go down, 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 down. And I don't have enough sustain at this point to keep it going. Now, the damage is okay. The damage is much better now on my build. I'll promise you. This is only with 2 support gems in, and then I'm using the fire concoction as well. So, but even here, you know, we're doing a lot of damage once we stun it. But look at my mana flask. It's at 20% basically. It's almost done. We're sitting at 20%. I think I might actually be able to get this whole boss done without having to use my bow. Like my actual like regular attack. We're running out of mana flask charges. We're at like 5% of our mana flask, and he basically dies with my last like charge. So that example was just there to show you that early on in the campaign, you need to have other skills like lightning skills, maybe barrage, whatever. Don't 100% rely on the concoction because you will like not be able to sustain it. Okay. Now here's another example of a boss fight. This is Doriani. Okay. At this point, I've completely switched over to my lightning concoction, and I don't have any other skills on my bar except for my auto shot on my bow. That's it. Now, we're doing, again, we're going to look at the mana flask charges on the bottom left. You can see I'm doing a lot more damage. Look how much damage I'm doing to Doriani. All right, we're kind of crushing him, right? This was Act 3. This was the end of Act 3, not Cruel. just regular. And I basically completely destroy him. And he actually bugs out, and he has like a bunch of abilities queued up, and it takes forever. So what you don't want to do is waste charges. Don't ever keep throwing your charges if the boss is like doing his queued up. Like, this takes forever. He's already dead, but I have to wait for him to queue through his abilities. Don't just randomly throw your flask charges, because you will waste you'll waste them all, and then you won't get them back. You can see right now my mana flask is sitting at about 25% or so. Okay, but now once he does this second transition, we get our flask charges back for free. I don't know if that's just the way that always works, but anyway, we get a refresh on our flask charges, which is huge. Now this is P2. We're back to throwing charges at him, and we're gonna slowly start to work him down. You can see his stun bar fills up really fast as well, and we have lightning exposure and shock on him. He's got 20% shock and then lightning exposure. One way that you're going to scale the damage of this build is by getting magnitude of shock. That's going to come later on once you get to mapping, because you're guaranteed to shock. So getting the magnitude of the shock is huge. You can see once he's stunned, we're doing a lot of damage to him there. And my mana flask charges are draining. You can see in the bottom left there, mana flask charges are going down. We're going down, but right as we get to the bottom, he dies. So in my experience during the campaign, I'm still in the campaign, by the way, but during the early campaign, when you first get this skill, it's the worst that it's ever going to be. It only gets better once you start getting a bunch of these mana nodes here, okay? In particular, these nodes up here in the top are very important. Reduced flask charges used from mana flasks. So now, whenever I throw my concoction, instead of it using 3 charges of my mana flask, it's actually going to be reduced by 18%, and then I actually have additional reduction for my belt, so another 12%. So it's actually 30% reduced mana flask charges used when I'm throwing. So 30% of 3 is almost 1. So instead of it costing 3 flask charges, it's going to cost like 2.1 or something. Like you can do the math behind your head there, but that's a massive difference. That again gets me more and more and more uses out of my flask, which is going to sustain my ability to use this ability, right? Again, like I said too, you're going to get magnitude of shock. That's where I'm going to go next. Very, very important, because that's how we scale our damage. That is the build in a nutshell. Okay, again, I'll just run over the ascendancies really quick. You want to get your concoction first. Your second ascendancy is going to be flask charges gain. Your third ascendancy is going to be defensive, where your life flasks will not queue once your unreserved life is filled. This is massive. So what you end up doing here is you're going to want to get a life flask that has a massive amount of life recovered, so that once you press that life flask button, even if you get to full health, it's going to keep going, because it has a massive number that it's trying to get to. But that'll be your third ascendancy. Okay. Very, very powerful defensively. Your fourth ascendancy, you could go less movement speed penalty when you're throwing your skills, because when you're throwing your skills, you have movement speed penalty, or you could just go 5 passive points. I think the passive points are probably, it's actually 6 in total. Sorry. You get 1 plus 5. So that's probably way, way more important, I would say, getting 6 skill points. But yeah, going into the end game, guys, you're going to want to pick up, again, lightning damage or cold damage nodes, but really you could get magnitude of shock. That's a really big one over here. You could end up getting cold damage stuff, and then you're just going to want to grab defenses, right? You want evasion for sure. And then I'm getting a source of blind is really, really important, I would say, for any evasion build. If you're ever wondering about that, getting blind is super important, because it makes enemies have less accuracy, which like is a multiplier on your evasion rating. So you're going to be dodging a lot more. Okay. Otherwise, yeah, the tree that I have right now, and I will link this down below in the like the Maxroll website. You can see the tree on Maxroll. The tree that I have right now, there's some stuff you could probably change on it, but where I am right now in my build, I am 100% able to sustain my flask charges with no other abilities on my bar, okay? That's just with like these nodes down here, these flask nodes, these mana flask nodes here, the big one being right here, connected chemistry, a couple more flask nodes right here, and that's about it for now. I will pick up, oh sorry, these ones up here are really important, yeah. And otherwise, I'm not going to be picking up any more flask nodes for now. I'm just going to be going into like projectile damage and a bunch of other stuff. I will show you the damage that I'm doing right now. Am I in Traders? Why am I in Traders Passage? No. I want to go to the Halani Gates, I think, right? Act 2. Where am I? There we go. I'm gonna just show you what this looks like in action now, okay? This is a zone that I'm in. Just for the mana flask really quickly, you can go to the PoE 2 trade site and you can buy a mana flask as well. And you can tell it to filter for increased number of charges, okay? And it will show you mana flasks that have a lot of charges. Just be careful about the level requirement, okay? If it's required level 50, then you're not going to be able to use it until level 50. So just be careful with that, okay? So again, I'm just going to be running around and I'll be throwing my concoction. I'm not going to be using... That was a rare. Literally just killed a rare in like one hit. I'm not going to be using my flame wall until I get to a boss. So wait, what am I doing here? I have the wrong thing on. There we go. Again, I've literally been one-shotting everything since Act 2, like normal. I'm not even kidding. I've just been kind of one-shotting all mobs. Rares usually last like 3 or 4 attacks. But besides that, guys, the damage from this is absolutely crazy. And of course, we're shocking all the time. So we're getting even more damage, which is really, really cool. So the only problem with this build, of course, is doors. Doors are going to ruin you. But, you know, that's just every range build. I am running Herald of Thunder and then Wind Dancer. Okay. Is this I don't know what was this. Yeah, this is area level 53. So this area level is the exact same as my level. Okay. I'm gonna find this little boss guy. There's a boss in here, right? Where is he? Here he is. Here he is. Here we go. So then we're gonna flame wall, and then we're gonna hit the boss, and he's basically dead in about 5 autos. And again, we're doing flame wall so that we can get an ignite on him. That's the important point that we need to do there. Get ignite on the bosses so that they get an extra 15% more damage taken. Okay. So that's the build in a nutshell. If you have any questions about it, I know this was a long-winded video, but I wanted to make sure I explained it all to you guys. So if you have any questions about it, let me know in the comments down below. I will try to answer any of them for you. I will post the passive tree underneath the max roll passive tree of what I have so far. There's probably some changes that you could make to it, but the most important nodes are going to be like harness the elements and vile wounds for damage. And then depending if you're going cold or lightning, you can kind of go whichever way you want to go. You can try a fire build if you want to, all the power to you, but I think it's probably got less synergy there. Remember, for your ascendancies, you're going to grab the concoction first, then flask charges, then the defensive life node here, and then passive points, I would say, as your 4th and final one. Otherwise, you want to find yourself, why does it keep switching? You want to find yourself a really good bow and quiver that give you +1 to proj, and flat elemental damage is a good friend, and then increased elemental damage with attacks is really good. You want to find a mana flask with the number of charges as high as you can make it, okay, as high as you can get it. And then otherwise, guys, I mean, this belt is good too. This is a good unique belt to wear early on, but you can find belts that are basically just as good as this, but this is a very, very good unique belt to get as well. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you guys so much again for watching. Love y'all. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Ask me any questions, okay? Catch you in the next one.